formed a majority. They formed governments twice in 1924 and 1929, but never with a majority. And they won nearly 400 then. So this is a better result than Labour's best ever government performance. And the Conservatives, oh my goodness. What has happened and can they do it? Who's there? I mean, can they really be governments twice in 1924 and 1929? Never with a majority. They won nearly 400 then. So this is a better result than Labour's best ever government performance. The Conservatives, oh my goodness. What has happened and can they do it? Who's there? I mean, can they really be governments twice in 1924?
That's going to really.
That's a tough one. It's going to sting that one.
And you know, you can see this is the example of where the reform vote takes a massive chunk of the Conservative vote, splits it, and Labour go through the middle. Yeah. That is going to hurt.
Majority
That's
of
11 cabinet ministers.
278.
Wow.
Still waiting for Mel
I think
Street.
Labour did have that in 97, though, if I remember rightly. Forrester Dean.
That's going to really.
It's going to sting that one. Difficult. Mark Harper was one of Sunak's supporters.
And just breaking that Lib chunk of the Conservative vote splits it and Labour go through the middle. Yeah. That is going to hurt.
Majority of 278.
Wow.
Still waiting for Mel
I
Street.
think Labour did have that in 97, though, if I remember rightly. Forrester Dean.
That's going to really.
It's going to sting that one. Mark Harper was one of Sunak's supporters.
And just breaking that Lib chunk of the Conservative vote splits it and Labour go through the middle. Yeah. That is going to hurt.
Majority of 278. Still waiting for Mel Street.
Remember rightly. Forrester Dean. It's going to sting that. Mark Harper was one of Sunak's.
And just breaking that Lib chunk of the Conservative vote splits it and Labour go through the middle. That is going to hurt.
78. Still waiting for Mel Street.
Forrester Dean. It's going to sting that. Mark Harper was one of Sunak's. It was
because of this result, because of what Reform has done. We'll pick a right-wing candidate that speaks to the purity of the tribe. We will lose. We'll lose heavily. We'll then decide that we weren't Tory enough. We'll pick an even further right person, which is what we kind of did.
Is there anybody even further right?
When you looked at IDS, you went, is there anybody further right? Oh, look, there's Michael Howard. You know, so it has happened before. In the same way as when Labour lost, they went to Ed Miliband, who was to the left of David Miliband, who was the favourite. He lost, so they went even further left. They went to Jeremy Corbyn. And then at some point, a party decides it wants to win power. Because being in opposition sucks, because you can't get things done. And eventually, you want to be able to change the country, because everybody goes into politics with the best of intentions to make a change. Now, we disagree about what those changes are, but the parties are there for that.
James Cleverly's declaration in Braintree. James Cleverly, the Home Secretary.
Okay, good morning, everybody. This is a declaration of a result of a poll for Braintree District Council, election of a Member of Parliament for Braintree on Thursday, the 4th of July, 2024. I, Dan Gascoigne, being the acting returning officer at the above election, do hereby give notice that the number of votes recorded for each candidate at the said election is as follows. Cleverly, James Spencer, Conservative Party candidate, 17,414. Franks Kieran Anthony, Liberal Democrat, 2,879. Heather David Christopher Norman, Independent, 767. Thompson Richard, Reform UK, 11,346. Thorogood Paul Richard, Green Party candidate, 2,878. Wright Matthew, Labour Party, 13,744. There are 167
the Home Secretary, former Home Secretary, has held his seat. You're watching Sky News Election Night live. It's just after 6:15 in the morning, Friday, the 5th of July. If you are just tuning our way, flipping heck, what a night it has been. Labour has won by a landslide, cantering towards 400 seats, just 5 away. The Conservatives have moved in to triple digits. It looked as though for a time, potentially, that wasn't going to happen. And they have lost cabinet seats by the bucket load, Beth. Go through a few of them.
Well, they're nearly up to losing a dozen cabinet seats now. They're just shy of that. They've lost Mark Harper, the Transport Secretary. They've lost Alex Chalk, the Justice Secretary, Gillian Keegan, the Education Secretary, Lucy Fraser, the Culture Secretary, Penny Mordaunt, the Leader of the Commons, Grant Shapps, the Defence Secretary, and amongst those, some of the would-be leadership contenders have gone. It has been the worst night ever for the Conservatives in terms of electoral record setting.
Shall we listen to the former chairman of the Conservative Party, former Home Secretary? Here he is.
By name, I would particularly like to single out my campaign manager and my agent, who have worked so tirelessly through this campaign. I'd also like, of course, to thank the other candidates. This has been, I think, a well-mannered and good-natured campaign, as it should be, and I think that shows the Braintree constituency for what we know it to be, which is a wonderful place full of wonderful people, and the fact that the candidates who put themselves forward reflected that, I think, is very much to their credit. And, of course, I would like to thank my family, my long-suffering family, my 2 sons, who have seen far less of me over the last 6 weeks. I was about to say than previously, but as a government minister, no one gets to see that much of me. And of course, I want to pay a special level of gratitude to my beautiful and wonderful wife, who has not just had to put up with me being a Member of Parliament and a minister, but as you know, has also fought and successfully won her own battle. I could not have done it without you, so thank you very much. This has been a very difficult night for my party, and losing the position of government of this country is painful, but it is the nature of our democracy that it happens. And when it happens, it is incumbent upon I suppose all parties, but particularly the party leaving government, to listen carefully to what the voters are telling us. I am not going to rush to any quick judgments. I think the right thing to do is be thoughtful and take a short period of time to really assess what the voters are telling us. But it is clear that when you see the voter share of the traditional main parties of government, that many voters are disillusioned with all of us, and we should take that on board. I think it is also right that we have the humility to recognise that there is nothing honourable in presenting simple and thin solutions to challenging and complex problems. And the world is a difficult and dangerous place, and we have to respond to that. But this evening, I will finish as I started, by saying thank you to the wonderful
Jeremy Hunt arriving back in Downing Street with his good lady to number 11 against all the odds. He held on to his seat at Godalming in Ash. It was nailed on that he was going to be losing that seat. He did not, although many others did, including close on a dozen ministers. Jacob Rees-Mogg also hit the deck. Penny Mordaunt gone, Johnny Mercer gone as well, Robert Buckland gone, Miriam Cates, Andrea Jenkins. And even on the Labour side, Trevor, you know, big beast went Jonathan Ashworth, you know, shadow health secretary at times, shadow paymaster general, I think his most recent position. Did you see that coming?
I didn't believe that would happen, but it was talked about. And this is a Leicester thing, you know, there is an issue to do with Gaza and Muslims. We're seeing it also in Birmingham. Look, both parties are going to have to reflect pretty hard on a couple of things. Tories are going to have to think about what reform means for them. Much smaller problem for Labour, but it's still a real one. 3 million or thereabouts Muslims in this country, clearly demonstrating they did not like the position that Labour took on Gaza. On this one, by the way, I think the Tories will be very, very relieved that Cleverly survived. I think, you know, there's very few of the kinds of people they can put on telly to look reasonable. And he was very clear, I think. Simple and thin solutions. He was talking about reform. And that's the battle that's going to start, I would guess, tomorrow.
Yeah, and reform, as far as reform is concerned, the hits keep on coming, Beth Rigby. 4 seats is what Reform won. They won Nigel Farage's seat, they won Richard Tice's seat, a lesser-known Rupert Lowe in Great Yarmouth, Conservatives into 3rd place there. And the first one to declare was Lee Anderson.
Yeah. I mean, this is a stonking night for Reform. They've picked up 4 seats. I imagine that they will have quite a large vote share, and I think they'll have piled up a few million votes. And it will all lead into and lean into Nigel Farage's argument when he and his fellow MPs turn up at Westminster, which is that the system is broken, it doesn't represent the people, and it needs reform, hence the name of the party. But he will be pushing for electoral reform and just hammering home this point on lower vote share and a big landslide. It could turn out, as these final seats come in, that Labour could get around 2/3 of the parliamentary seats on just over 1/3 of the vote, OK? And that when you look at it in that context of how they've piled up this big majority on a relatively low vote share compared with other leaders who piled up massive majorities, I agree with you, Auntie, this is going to be one of the most consequential governments, potentially, given the size of the majority, if Keir Starmer can take the win and then turn it into something substantial within government. But the mandate, I would argue, is shallow, and that is going to make it harder work with the public, because I really do believe this election, I don't want to take away from the massive achievement of Labour, but this election is as much about people rejecting the Conservative Party as it has been about embracing Keir Starmer's Labour.
Yes, I agree with that. I mean, the mandate in terms of the popular vote is thin, not obviously in terms of the number of MPs, but also the lack of clarity about what Labour is actually for, not helped by the lack of clarity over the manifesto and the whole Starmer project. and the lack of any philosophical underpinning. We go back to Attlee, we think of Keynes, we think of Beveridge, I mean, giants underpinning them. Wilson had his own really serious philosophers and thinkers, including Tony Crosland. Blair had figures like Giddens. I mean, who are the philosophical figures who are underpinning the whole Starmer project? So lack of mandate, lack of clarity, and yet he has a momentous challenge in front of him to show that government works after 14 years of pretty disappointing Conservative governments, which flip-flopped.
I want to go down to Downing Street now.
OK, sorry.
Murray is standing by for us. Murray, we have seen the Chancellor arrive just a few moments ago. We've trained on the door of number 10 there. It started in the pouring rain. That's how it's ended.
Absolutely, Kay. Morning from a wet and rainy Downing Street, where later today Rishi Sunak will tender his resignation. He will go to the King and he will essentially say, I'm done. Then Keir Starmer will be officially appointed by the King and he will walk through that door and be our next Prime Minister, officially appointed by the monarch. This is a momentous day. Labour has managed to carry that Ming vase all the way to Downing Street without dropping it. An incredible achievement by the Labour Party and something that many people thought was not possible just 5 years ago with a historic defeat under Jeremy Corbyn. So now we are waiting for not only Rishi Sunak to be coming in here and leaving for the last time, no longer Prime Minister, but also Keir Starmer to be moving in. We now have a new inhabitant of Downing Street.
Yeah, Tories have lost the seats of several former Prime Ministers: Whitney, Cameron, Finchley, Thatcher, Henley, Boris Johnson. Still trust to come in Norfolk. So lots to still keep an eye on. Coming to you, Ruth, in just a second, because I just want to pause. Just tuning our way. You're watching Election Night Live, even though it's the morning. It's almost 6:30, a night to go down in the history books. Labour has won the general election by a landslide. So Keir Starmer will be the next Prime Minister.
You campaigned for it, you fought for it, you voted for it, and now it has arrived. Change begins now.
Across the country, the Conservatives have lost more than 200 seats, including those of Cabinet Ministers Grant Shapps, Penny Mordaunt and Gillian Keegan.
The Labour Party has won this general election, and I have called Sir Keir Starmer to congratulate him on his victory.
But it's also been a good night for Reform, who've won 4 seats, including for their leader Nigel Farage in Clapton. The Greens also winning 4 seats. Meanwhile, a huge comeback underway for the Liberal Democrats, who've won more than 60 seats. Birmingham Ladywood Declaration coming up.
Election of Member of Parliament to General Election, Birmingham Ladywood constituency. I, Robert Connolly, being the acting returning officer at the above election, do hereby give notice that the number of votes recorded for each candidate at the said election is as follows. Chandler Zoe, Green Party, 3,478. Darg Lee James, Liberal Democrats, 1,711. Mahmood Shabana, Labour Party, 15,558. Same applies over there. Muzal Shazad, known as Shaz Muzali, I do beg your pardon, the Conservative Party candidate, 2,218. Yaqub Ahmed, Independent, 12,137.
Safest Labour seat in the West Midlands.
Excuse me, I haven't finished. Thank you.
Second in the whole country.
Henry Irene, Reform UK, 1,477. Total rejected ballot papers is 203. This represents a majority of 3,421 with a 43.9% turnout. As such, I do hereby declare that Shabana Mahmood is duly elected as the Member of Parliament for Birmingham Ladywood constituency.
Usually reduced majority.
That's a great result.
But,
really pleased for her.
She
She's
has held on.
decent,
there.
smart, really capable politician.
Yeah, she's the justice. She'll become the Justice Secretary. That was a
Thank you very much. I would first like to thank the
seat.
returning officer, those who have counted the votes today, the clerks and all the polling staff, and the police who have had to go above and beyond to ensure a safe and secure election today. My wonderful agent, Marcus Bernasconi.
Looking at probably the next Justice Secretary there. A record number of Cabinet Ministers have lost their seats tonight, including, shall we have a look at one or two of them, some well-known faces. The Justice Secretary, Alex Chalk, was the first major figure to lose his Cheltenham seat. Minutes later, the Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, just before 4 a.m, Gillian Keegan, here she comes, fell. The Education Secretary was beaten by a huge 12,000 votes by the Lib Dems. Potential leadership contender Penny Mordaunt also lost to Labour in Portsmouth North. Possibly the Portillo moment, as Andy sees it, of the night, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg lost by 5,000 votes. And in the last hour, the Transport Secretary, Mark Harper, became the 11th loss, beaten by just 278 votes. Somebody who held on. But what's going to happen next? The Home Secretary, James Cleverly, is with us. I think your speech said it all. I mean, it was an acceptance speech, but we know you to be quite outgoing, quite ebullient. Not tonight.
Well, my friend and colleague Priti Patel is just giving her acceptance speech. So, if you forgive me if I don't raise my voice too highly, because I don't want to interrupt her. But it's been an incredibly difficult night. It's a privilege to be returned as the MP for Braintree, and I'm very grateful that that has happened. But that has got to be tempered with the realisation that we are no longer in government, and it's not just that. It's the nature of why that has happened. So we need to think about what our offer is to the British people, what our offer is to the voters of this country, think about why this has happened, and perhaps, I think, have the humility and professionalism to take a short period of time of reflection before we start trying to answer what is, I think, a very, very important and difficult question that we've been asked tonight by the voters.
You've lost so very many of your cabinet colleagues. Even on a personal level, that must be painful for you.
Yeah, of course. I mean, they're not just colleagues. In many instances, they're friends, people you work with quite regularly, people that I've campaigned with. So it is difficult, and of course their staff, the people that work for them in their parliamentary offices, they will have an uncertain future. It's the nature of our democracy, and democracy is both a beautiful and brutal thing. And tonight it feels particularly difficult for us in the Conservative Party.
James, it's Beth Rigby here. We saw each other out on the campaign trail, didn't we, up in Nottinghamshire last week? And you were going around the country. You were still fighting the fight. You were still trying to talk up the prospects of some sort of success. You said to me back then last week that whatever happened next, the party had to stay in the centre ground, the centre-right ground, but you emphasised the word centre. What's your message to colleagues this morning? And you wouldn't answer the question to me or Trevor, because Trevor asked you as well last week. Are you considering running for leadership?
So, in terms of what the party needs to do, it's not just about moving, it's about making sure that we are a broad-based party. I grew up looking at the Conservative Party under Margaret Thatcher, and she was a leader of intense principle and philosophy, but she ran a government that was a pretty broad church. and we need to make sure that we are a party in the modern era which encompasses the full range of centre-right thinking. I said in my acceptance speech, it would be wrong for us to believe that we can just apply or promote simple, thin and I think impractical solutions for the challenges that we face both here as a country and globally. And I think it would be unprofessional for politicians of any party to suggest there are easy answers to these difficult questions. So we have to be disciplined, we have to be thoughtful, and with regard to future leadership, I stand by what I said at the time. My focus has been on retaining my seat. It was closer in terms of results than ones that I've had in the past. I'm very glad that I was relentlessly focused on being returned as an MP, and what might happen in the future, I'll leave that for the near future.
James, Trevor here. Speaking of humility, listening and being thoughtful, does the broad church, the full range of centre-right opinion, include Nigel Farage?
I've been asked this a number of times, and my view remains unchanged. He has, through this campaign, said it is his mission, and it's quite interesting what his motivation was, not to get as many Reform MPs elected as possible, and indeed it seems that they've had success, but modest success in doing that. But his main motivator was to harm the Conservative Party. I cannot see how that is a credible application for being part of the Conservative Party. So my view is that it is voters who we should appeal to rather than members of Parliament of other parties. And if we get that offer to the British people right, I can absolutely see, with a very large majority but on a very modest predicted share of vote, the Labour Party tonight have every reason to be happy, but I think they also should have the humility to recognise it was not a ringing endorsement by the British people. And the lesson I think my party should take from that is that if we listen carefully to what the British people are telling us, then there is every reason to believe, just as Labour went from a very bad defeat to a victory, we could do likewise.
How can you say it's not a ringing endorsement, James Cleverly? Labour have got 403 seats and you guys have got 111.
As I said, they have every reason to be very, very happy, but they should also, I think, reflect on the fact that they are predicted to have that very large majority, which is, and as I say, I'm not taking that away from them, but it is on a fairly modest share of the vote for such a margin. And the proportion of British voters that did not vote for either the Labour Party or the Conservative Party, and I haven't crunched the numbers fully, is probably larger than we've seen in a very, very long time. And we should, all parties, Labour, Conservative particularly, think, why is that? What lessons could we or should we take from other elections around the world? And how should we respond to that? But these are not off-the-cuff actions that we should take. We should think carefully about this and not jump to conclusions.
James, I think you're sort of trying to underplay Labour's achievement here. I mean, this is an historic achievement in terms of British political history, and these are the worst results ever in the history of the Conservative Party. Now, I appreciate you're speaking, honestly and openly, but I'm not sure you're calling that quite right. The scale of your defeat is huge, and Labour, by whichever means, has won an historic majority. Can you not recognise that?
No, I did. I mean, I did, and I said that they have every reason to be very, very happy with the results that they've got. They have got, Keir Starmer has secured what looks to be a large majority for the Labour Party, and I absolutely recognise that. But what I've also said is that we need to be thoughtful, and all of us, including the Conservative Party, and I also think the Labour Party, and maybe I shouldn't be giving the Labour Party advice, but the simple fact of the matter is the proportion of the British people who voted for the two main parties, the traditional two parties of government, is, I think, and as I say, I will need to crunch the numbers, I think a smaller proportion of the vote than we've seen for a very, very, very long time. And Labour can do one of two things, and they can either ignore that fact or they can reflect on that fact. Because we are now in opposition, we have no choice but to reflect on that fact. I think it would be better for British politics as a whole if both parties thought carefully about why so many British voters did not feel comfortable putting their vote for either Labour or Conservative.
Okay.
I know my party will think about that, and as I say, perhaps it's foolish of me giving advice to Labour, but I think Labour should do the same thing as well.
Go and get some sleep. It's good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Thank you for taking the time. Very much appreciated. Just to mention that Sinn Féin will be the largest party in Northern Ireland. You'll remember a few moments ago, I was telling you that the Conservatives have lost several seats of former Prime Ministers. Whitney for David Cameron, Finchley for Margaret Thatcher, Henley for Boris Johnson, Truss still to come in Norfolk. Another one has just fallen. Maidenhead, Theresa May's old seat. Liz Truss declaration coming up in just a second. Maidenhead has gone to the Lib Dems.
Goodness me.
Theresa May, Lib Dems
Theresa May's
seat has gone.
Goodness me.
It was the fourth safest seat,
Goodness
wasn't it,
me.
in some time in her tenure. It's gone
and
to
also,
the Lib Dems.
The Liz Truss is looking...
well dodged, I think, is the phraseology we use.
Well dodge is totally accurate.
There we go. Let's squeeze in. Let's squeeze in Ed while we can. Ed, go.
Let's squeeze in.
Go on.
So this is so let's do it. Should we do a quick recap on on where we are, the big picture? Because there's just so much going on. It's worth just taking a step back and reminding ourselves of the story. And the story is this completely transformed political map in the UK. And let's focus in particular. First of all, we'll take a look at what's happened in terms of change of seats. So there's Labour in terms of seats in Parliament, over 400 now, losing just 6, but gaining 211. Conservatives down to 113, gaining only 1, and down 242. And the Lib Dems, just look at that, up to 69, but gaining 61. And doing it basically while barely increasing their share of the vote. So pretty extraordinary for the Lib Dems. And the SNP collapse as well. And the Green Party doing better even than the exit poll suggested. But beneath this picture of a Labour landslide, and it is a clear Labour landslide, there's something kind of interesting here, which is when you look at the actual votes here, so the number of votes that have been counted, this is Tony Blair in 1997. And bear in mind, we're talking about Keir Starmer having a similar kind of landslide to Tony Blair in 1997. Not quite there, but getting towards it. Now compare to what we've just got in terms of the numbers for Keir Starmer. So they are nowhere near. This is just the quantum, the sheer quantum of people casting a vote for Keir Starmer is nowhere near where it was for Tony Blair, and yet he's managing to get... In fact, by the way, it's nowhere near as much as it was for Jeremy Corbyn. In 2017, Jeremy Corbyn won considerably more votes than Keir Starmer has this time around. So it's a really striking example of what happens when you're kind of efficient about your vote, when you're able to convert a relatively small vote compared with that into a lot of seats. And that's partly because of the collapse, the punishment, the near destruction of the Conservative Party. And if we look at just what's happened here with the Conservative share of the vote, this is going back through history, OK? So we're going back here to 1835, and each of these bars is showing you how much of the share of the vote the Conservative Party has had at these elections. Look, that's the early days of the Conservative Party. And if we bring on where we are now, we are basically talking about, I'll just kind of draw a line so you can see, we are basically talking about the lowest share of the vote, give or take, that we have really ever seen for the Conservative Party. Historic punishment for the Conservatives here. To the extent that, so the number of deposits forfeited, and obviously you lose your deposit if you don't gain 5% of the votes in a constituency. The number of deposits lost by the Conservative Party in this election is now more than in any previous election going back to, well, kind of back to the invention of the deposit as something that the MPs put forward in these elections. And just to put it into perspective, that 30 is not far off how many deposits
OK.
The Reform Party
Ed, we must...
is forfeiting
I'm so
as
sorry.
well.
Yep.
Just underlines that point.
OK, sorry to interrupt. The
All right.
slow hand clapping in Norfolk
Yes.
Southwest. Now, why would they be doing that?
Is Liz Truss not turning?
Why are they doing this, Beth?
I think that it looks like Liz Truss hasn't arrived on stage for her count. She's defending the seat of South West Norfolk.
To explain to people how it works, just before the announcement, you get taken to the side and you're told the results. So the people standing on the stage know what the result is, but they've only just been told. They're told seconds before they're asked to walk up the steps and stand there. We saw...
and you got intel that potentially she's lost.
Well, as I said, I think maybe about an hour ago, we'd been hearing from senior Conservatives there was some question, not whether she was going to be first or second, but a question over whether she was going to be second or third.
Yeah.
They were trying to get in contact with
and her
people on the
team
ground
told me
there,
that-
and her team were not answering their phones, they weren't picking up, they weren't getting back to us. So there is a suggestion that it has... This could be a very big moment of the night.
Yes.
Yeah, just to say, all the broadcasters are now looking at the same thing. We're all looking at the same image, and that is a stage where the former Prime Minister is not on it. Where is she? They've slow hand clapped her. They've waited. They're looking here. They're looking there, and they cannot find Liz Truss anywhere. Where on earth could she be? How long do they wait before they decide that they're going to do the declaration
Here we are.
anyway? There she is. Well done, Liz.
David Flux, being the returning officer.
Here we go, everybody. This could be historic.
South West Norfolk,
Again.
do hereby give notice that the number of votes recorded for each candidate is as follows. Bagg, James. Independent, 6,282. Conway, Gary Daniel Dominic. Heritage Party, Freedom Family Nation, 160. Duvalapalli, Pallavi, Green Party, 1,838. Douglas, Lorraine, Communist Party of Britain, 77. Jeremy, Terry, Labour Party, 11,847.
For Labour.
Mackenzie, Tobias, Reform UK, 9,958.
9,000 plus.
Of East Anglia, Earl Elvis, Official Monster Raving Loony Party, 338. Ratcliffe, Josie, Liberal Democrats, 2,618. Truss, Liz, the Conservative Party candidate, 11,217.
Oh, I think she's lost. Yep, she's lost. Into second place.
The number of ballot papers
second place
rejected
behind,
was 139.
Labour.
And I
with you
do
straight away.
hereby declare
Yeah, I mean, this is not one that had been necessarily on the radar. We knew that there was going to be a lot of tactical voting, as Beth and I had talked about earlier in the programme. I think that will be a shock to her. I think in terms of the people that supported her very brief premiership, a lot of whom continued to support her afterwards, thought there was a potential way back for her. I think there are a lot of people within the Conservative Party that can trace back our absolute rout tonight to what happened during her very brief premiership and the fact that Rishi Sunak was never going to be able to recover
Is it a shock, though, Ruth?
confidence.
Because she didn't really show any humility, though, did she, after? She'd left Downing Street and started writing books about why I was right and why the establishment stopped.
This is a big shock. This is a big shock. This was a very safe seat. She was not expected to lose it. In the run-up to the election, there was a big campaign in her seat about tactical voting, and Liz Truss, the former Prime Minister, the shortest ever-serving Prime Minister, is out of Parliament, and she's lost her seat by just, over 600 votes. That, to me, is the Portillo moment of this general election.
Can you hold that
is
thought for a
just
second? Because
something else.
the DUP, Ian Paisley, has lost North Antrim as well. A big shock as well for our Northern Ireland viewers. It was deemed the DUP's safest seat. That has also gone. What a night it has been. I mean, from the moment...
You know...
The
first time in 54 years someone from Paisley, called Paisley, his dad or him, hasn't held that seat.
There you go.
Also,
good fact.
the other thing is,
from the exit poll at 10 o'clock to now.
But when we were going around the country, every time Liz Truss was mentioned, she provoked a reaction. She has lit a touch paper amongst voters in a way that it's very visceral and it's been very damaging to the Conservatives. And I imagine there will be a number of your colleagues that think that it is just rewards that Liz Truss has been voted out.
That's why I say it wasn't a shock, though, because of those feelings.
There is also, Beth, this is one of the echoes, because when you have the microphone, when you're the government, you can tell a story about your predecessors. You can pin things on them. So we pinned on that Gordon Brown crashed the economy. He didn't fix the roof when the sun was shining. He sold the gold. So when it comes to us trying to win back these seats, trying to win back power, the Labour Party that's coming in now, this period, this 47 days or whatever it was so disastrous. She's going to be the one that put up your mortgage. She's going to be the one that crashed the economy. She's going to be the one that increased inflation. However much of that becomes lore, however much of that is buried in fact, whatever it is, a lot of what's coming down the track is going to be traced back to this. And, you know, Rishi Sunak tried to steady the economic ship with Jeremy Hunt. I think what happened during that period was fairly irrecoverable. Boris Johnson had sort of shown the moral bankruptcy. She showed the economic bankruptcy. And where does the Tory party go, whether it's values or its competence?
OK, Liz Truss speaking, guys. Will she? She should speak. Let's see if she does. Come on, Liz, are you coming up to this microphone or not? Yep. No, she doesn't fancy it. No.
This
Thanks
hasn't
very
happened
much.
in 100 years.
No.
Sorry?
Apparently, this hasn't happened in 100 years.
Somebody who'd served as a
Prime Minister to have lost their seat.
Yeah.
The Tories have also now equalled the 246 losses that they suffered in the 1906 Liberal landslide. So Arthur Balfour, all the awful records that he hit, that was the lowest. 156 seats he won, 246 losses. The Conservatives are on less seats and the losses equal to that of 1906. It really is a record-breaking night and in all the wrong ways for the Conservatives.
Yeah, one wonders how gracious she was during that declaration. Many, perhaps not too generously, blaming her for the demise of the Conservative Party. Would you be one of them, Ruth?
Well, I certainly think that, you know, to be honest, you can absolutely see the anger that there was after Partygate with Boris Johnson, and in terms of that kind of that moral crumble that was there, and then you had the double whammy of her coming in, and then there being this massive shock to the economic system, which affected everybody's back pocket, it affected all those people's mortgages, it affected all of this area. You know, it was almost impossible for any Prime Minister to recover. I think Rishi Sunak did his best. He ran a terrible campaign, I mean, in terms of the last 6 weeks. But what I'm noticing as well is we've only got 28 seats to declare. The Tory party may not make their exit poll number here.
Labour will be higher than the exit poll, I think. But I just think, you know, the result doesn't surprise me, as I said, because she never showed any sort of humility. But also going to the United States, to that neocon conference, sharing a platform with Steve Bannon, who's now in jail,
We're almost out of time, guys. We're almost out of time. What a night it has been. Handing over the baton to Sophie momentarily. Goodness me, Sophie, you've managed to have a little bit of sleep, I'm sure, during the night. During that time, it's been quite exciting.
I did manage to get a bit of sleep, but I have to say, Kate, it has been quite a challenge because I've been absolutely gripped by the coverage that you and everyone else has been giving on what a historic night it has been. I mean, of course, the main story, the huge losses by the Conservative Party, but also it does also seem quite extraordinary as well that this is a Labour majority that feels as if it's built with the same stuff as the Ming Vase. It'll be so interesting to hear from Sir Keir Starmer later on to see, of course, how he decides to tackle the huge challenges facing the country when the transfer of power happens. We'll, of course, be bringing you that as well. Kay.
Fantastic. Sophie, thanks very much indeed. We've got 90 seconds to off air. How does this compare to previous memories?
Yeah,
really quickly.
I'm having, obviously, flashbacks to 97. I mean, this just feels great. It'll feel great for all people of a Labour affiliation across the country. We waited a long time for it. I think this is the government that's coming in is going to exceed expectations, mark my words.
Ruth Davis.
Everything has changed. Scotland has changed. The UK across the whole has changed. The politics been tipped on its head. It's going to take weeks to extrapolate all the different threads, but a terrible night for us, terrible night for the SNP, brilliant night for Labour.
Trevor Phillips.
Shattering loss for the Conservatives, menacing advance of reform, which I think is the biggest thing of the night, and fantastic, amazing result for Keir Starmer. Nobody believed he could do it. He has.
And for me, it's just been to see a Labour landslide and to watch it unfold in this way. I think Keir Starmer has the potential to be one of the most consequential prime ministers since the Second World War, if he takes this majority and he uses it wisely. Yeah. But I think he's got huge challenges as the vote splits. And I think this has been the rise of the other election.
For me, too many Portillo moments to count, really. We had a Portillo moment, then another one, then another one. We had another one right at the end of the show where Liz Truss, a former Prime Minister, has lost her seat. Oh, my goodness me, what a night. Sophie's next. Enjoy the rest of your day.